If a black woman boarded first class in old sweatpants and a faded sweatshirt, what would come to the gate agent's mind? A regular passenger? A furtive person? Someone who didn't belong? When the boarding agent ripped up her passport in the middle of a crowded airport, she had no idea that she had just set off one of the biggest airline scandals in modern history. It all started with a look of prejudice. No one thought that what would shake an entire airline would be a spilled cup of tea, a doubtful word, and a torn passport. But in the world of aviation security, where everything is built on trust and systems, sometimes it's the little things that expose the most dangerous vulnerabilities. Olivia Munro walked into Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport on a Thursday morning in the middle of autumn. The sunlight streamed through thick glass windows and slid across the polished marble floors. No one paid any attention to the middle-aged woman, her hair tied back in a bun, no makeup, a worn black backpack in her hands, and scuffed sneakers. She wore a light gray sweatsuit and a sweatshirt with a faded logo from West Point, where she had graduated more than 20 years earlier. That's how Olivia always moved, quietly, unnoticed, making no mark. For the past 10 days, she has been living in a windowless hotel in Miami to command Clear Skies campaign, a secret national security audit that examined compliance at major airports across the country. None of the staff knew who she was. To them, she was just another demanding, questioning, complaining passenger. But when the reports were filed back in Washington at 3 a.m., the name signed at the bottom of each page was Olivia D. Munro, Senior Investigator, Federal Aviation Security Office. That day, work ended. All she wanted was a 2-hour flight home, no gossip, no investigation, no one to look at her twice. So she chose the simplest outfit, walked the fastest, and booked a first-class ticket, the little privilege she rewards herself with after each campaign completion.
But prejudice knows no rank. It knows no duty. It accepts no reason. Ascend Air's Gate B32 was familiar to Olivia. She'd witnessed 4 subtle incidents of racism at this very counter in the past 2 months. But this time, she wasn't watching. She was a passenger. She arrived at the gate on time, keeping her electronic boarding pass in her phone and carrying it with her dark blue U.S. passport, a document accepted on all domestic flights. The woman who was guarding the gate that day was named Brenda Kowalski, 43 years old, blonde hair as stiff as a helmet, neat Ascend uniform, name tag clearly printed. She was smiling happily at a white family who had just asked where to sit. "Darlings, everything is perfect. You're all set." Her voice was as sweet as honey. Just then, an Indian man asked gently about the flight time. Brenda's voice changed into a military tone. "Sir, it boards when it boards. Please listen to announcements." Olivia stood behind a few people, still silent, but the investigator in her couldn't be turned off. Her eyes took in every detail. Her back straightened a little. It was her turn. Olivia stepped forward, scanned her ticket, and showed her passport. Brenda glanced over, then stopped. His eyes glanced down at the tracksuit, up at the faded West Point logo, then back down to the sneakers. There was no smile, no darling, just one question. A passport? For a domestic flight? Cold voice, sharp as a paper knife. Olivia replied calmly, "Yes, it's my primary ID, government issued." Brenda picked up the passport as if it were covered in dirt. She turned the pages with 2 fingers, tilting them toward the light as if examining a diamond. Her eyes narrowed, and she tapped her index finger against the photo. "You look different here. Younger. Happier." No one smiled. No one asked anything, but the atmosphere around started freezing. "Munro, Dr. Munro, what's the PhD in, dear? Art history?" Olivia remained calm. "Aeronautical engineering. Is there an issue?" Brenda didn't answer right away. Instead, she turned to a passenger behind her and muttered just loud enough, "First class. A brand new passport. Doesn't add up."
A word, a look, a cut,
And Olivia's little mental audit started running. She had seen this scenario too many times. Implicit suspicion, open sarcasm, questioning of identity, qualifications, and presence. Not with evidence, but with prejudice. "The passport is legitimate," Olivia said, "issued by the U.S. Department of State. You can verify it." Brenda lowered her voice, but her lips curled up. "Or maybe you bought it. People like you can be resourceful. I've seen fake IDs, fake cards, fake everything." The insult was no longer hidden. And then, in a moment when the whole world held its breath, Brenda raised her hand and snapped the passport in half. The sound of tearing rang out clearly, like a knife cutting into the veins of a system. 2 pieces of passport fluttered down to the counter. One had Olivia's photo, the other had American coat of arms. The line of people behind stands still. The woman in the sweatshirt did not bend down, she did not resist.
Simply stand up straight. In aviation security, there are events that only require one move to become a disaster. A minor bump on the runway can open a 6-month investigation. An ID verification error can send the whole system tumbling like dominoes. And when a book official passport is torn in half by airline staff in front of passengers and surveillance cameras, it is equivalent to activate black code. Code Black is not listed in the passenger handbook. It is not announced over the loudspeaker. But in the FAA's internal system, Black Tag is the second highest alert level, after Red Alert. That is, an incident has occurred. There are signs of federal violations. Direct supervision is required. As soon as Olivia Munro was denied boarding and her passport was torn up, a gray signal was sent back to a special dispatch center in Arlington, Virginia, where only 12 people were granted access. During the next 22 minutes, the following things happened simultaneously. B32 gate camera is accessed directly. Brenda's voice recognition is analyzed. An order was issued to maintain the position of all personnel at Station B. And finally, the terms "activate black tag under investigator disruption" is activated. Olivia didn't need to be told. The system recognized her as soon as her ticket was scanned. But she remained a passenger, just like she had been in her 17 years of undercover auditing. The only difference is, this time the person opposite has crossed the line. Brenda Kowalski didn't know that. She just saw a black woman in a sweatshirt who didn't know her limits. And like so many times in the past, Brenda acted like she was in control in an airport where privilege and prejudice go hand in hand. Security guards appeared. No one shouted, no one pulled. But the entire area from Gate B29 to B35 was swept by the cold eyes of those don't wear FAA uniforms but possess authority over airlines. A young passenger captured the entire scene on video, from Brenda's eyes to the moment the passport was torn. She posted the video on a social media platform with a simple caption: "Gate B32. They say first class is for those of good standing. What is standing if not the color of their skin?" Within 2 hours, the clip reached 4 million views. Within 6 hours, the FAA received more than 12,000 calls asking to investigate racist behavior at the Atlanta airport.
And within 24 hours, the name Olivia Munro became a search trend, although she remained silent. Unknown to anyone, at the same time, in a closed FAA conference room, a 74-page report was opened. Operation Clear Skies, Phase 3. The first page has a red mark, "Confidential by Investigator Munro."
The content is a list of 23 airports with more than 114 violations, ranging from minor to serious, including unfair handling of passengers, falsification of technical documents, prolonging the use of non-standard equipment, and bias in the body check process. Every detail was recorded by Olivia herself. Over 9 months of working quietly, anonymously, like a normal person. The Gate B32 event is just the last drop, but it is the very thing that makes every wall of closure unable to stand for another second. Brenda was asked to leave immediately. At first, she tried to argue. She looked suspicious. But when the agent showed his federal card and said, "You destroyed the lawful property of a government investigator," all speech stopped. No one handcuffed Brenda. There was no need. The collapse wasn't the sound of metal locking wrists. It was by silence. Of an entire airport when knowing, the person they despise is the one who holds them in power. Olivia, meanwhile, said nothing. She left the airport by her own private entrance, ticketless. A black SUV was waiting on the south side of the terminal. Inside was the FAA's chief dispatcher, a short, balding man with eyes like metal. "It seems time to announce part of the campaign," he said, opening his briefcase.
Olivia nodded. "Not because of me, but because now the public has seen. Every investigation needs a detonation incident. Gate B32 became that explosion. In just 72 hours, newspapers, TV stations, podcasts, Twitter, YouTube, all reported it. The story was no longer "a clerk tore up a passport." It was, "Why was a senior investigator publicly discriminated against? Who is covering for Brenda Kowalski? How many other passengers have been treated like this, but had no position to protest?" The media wave hit Ascend Air like a tidal wave, and when the water receded, all their weaknesses were exposed under the sun. Throughout Ascend Air's 27 years in operation, the mid-range carrier has prided itself on its on-time performance and competitive prices. But never before in the history of U.S. aviation has an airline had to call an emergency shareholders meeting at midnight just because a gatekeeper was caught on video tearing up a passport. The problem is not the action, it is the person who was offended. The name Olivia Munro is not a household name, but in the world of aviation security, it is. Underground badge for those she inspected. Reports signed by her have caused many airports to lose their operating licenses. Once, in Philadelphia, a small airline had its license revoked because 2 minutes short of the suspicious passenger quarantine procedure. And now, big airlines like Ascend Air are facing an unprecedented audit. The morning after the event at Gate B32, the National Transportation Security Center, NTSC, issued a decision to open a special audit of Ascend Air. Not just the Atlanta branch, but all 76 domestic routes and 18 international destinations. Campaign name, Operation Back Gate. Content, investigation into systemic bias and falsification of technical documentation related to passengers and equipment.
Brenda Kowalski has been suspended indefinitely. But the surprise is, she is not alone. A long list of frontline workers is listed. From supervisors to technicians, from dispatchers to baggage handlers, all have been exposed through Olivia's reporting during Operation Clear Skies. Gate B32 is just the tip of an iceberg that has been submerged for many years. The first person to be questioned was Frank Miller, Brenda's direct supervisor. A middle-aged man with silver-gray hair, a soft voice, and a navy tie, Frank was the kind of man the board trusted. He never made things difficult for his subordinates, nor did he question his superiors.
But when asked why there was no response to internal complaints of discriminatory behavior by the gate team, Frank replied, "There is no concrete evidence. It's all based on feelings. And I don't think we need to create a crisis just because of personal feelings." That answer, which seems reasonable, is the end of his career. Because ignoring signs of violation is not neutrality. That is complicity. Olivia doesn't speak publicly, but from her Arlington office, she directly supervises special inspection teams, issues risk classification codes, and specifically requests reinvestigate 3 previously shelved incidents. A black passenger was removed from a flight for allegedly being uncooperative, even though video showed he was only asking to change seats to be closer to his son.
A Chinese female passenger was denied a medical support seat on board because it was not the correct size, resulting in a wrist injury when the plane landed. A loss of cabin pressure occurred due to an overdue sensor. This device had been noted by the technician as needing replacement, but the extension of time was signed by Frank Miller. Meanwhile, the media did not stand aside. The columns 60 Minutes, CNN Investigates, and Washington Post simultaneously published independent investigative articles using information from anonymous reports that were once forgotten. A former Ascendair employee named Jasmine told television, "If a passenger looked un-first class, we were told to check more closely. It was never written down, but everyone understood. You don't have to say black to differentiate. You just have to repeat the sentence, 'Are they qualified?' many times." In Texas, a group of passengers filed a class action lawsuit seeking compensation from Ascendair for emotional distress caused by unjustified denials. In California, a Latina single mother shared that her son was once called non-security simply for wearing sunglasses and a hoodie in a train station. The small pieces began to come together, and the big picture, the implicit bias system in the airline industry, is coming to light. Amid the public uproar, Ascendair CEO Jonathan Rees spoke out in a rare press conference. "We deeply apologize for the recent incident, but we believe this was an individual action that does not reflect the entire organization." An old reporter asked again, "So why, over the past 3 years, have more than 78% of discrimination complaints come from gates operated by Ms. Kowalski's own team?" Mr. Rees was silent.
Elsewhere, Olivia Monroe and a team of young investigators sift through thousands of airport video clips. They learn to analyze employee facial expressions, processing times, and even lengths of suspicious glances. And they learned one thing. The distinction does not come only in words. It comes from silence, from looks, from delays, from interruptions, from seemingly reasonable decisions made over and over again by the same group of people. In American culture, people often say, "Don't make a big deal out of it," or "Everyone makes mistakes." But a mistake repeated hundreds of times within the same system is no longer a mistake. That is intention. It is often said that justice is a turtle, slow, steady, and eventually it will arrive. But in America, where reputations can be torn apart overnight in the media, justice requires more than just slowly, but also sharply. 4 weeks after the Gate B32 incident, the case was formally brought before the United States Federal Court in Washington, D.C. The first hearing of the Brenda Kowalski case took place in a cold room. White light covered the pale face of the person who had shouted, "You don't belong here." From all over, observers, lawyers, reporters, and even passengers who had been denied service by Ascendair, they flocked to the courtroom not to watch Brenda collapse, but to witness a system brought to light.
The lead prosecutor in the case is Elliot Sanchez. A Puerto Rican native and Harvard law graduate, is known for taking giant corporations to court without flinching. In front of the crowded seats, he stood up and opened. "Your Honor, this is not just a case of a torn passport. This invisible policy trial has been rooted in the aviation industry for 3 decades. A black woman with a valid passport, valid ticket, and a history of working for the U.S. government publicly humiliated, simply because others thought she didn't look like first class. As the trial progressed, a series of reform proposals were being drafted in the FAA offices. Olivia Munro did not directly participate in the defense. She did not need to. Her job was not to speak up, but to prepare evidence to make the voice become undeniable truth. Each of the 12 boxes of documents given the prosecutors contained hundreds of video recordings, logs, internal responses, and audit trails from Operation Clear Skies. All were encrypted, cross-referenced, and authenticated to federal standards. There was one particular moment in the trial that stunned the nation. That was when the prosecutor played an internal transcript recorded by a former Ascend Air employee named Daniel Roth. In the recording, Brenda says with a smirk, "They were a mess. Their bags were torn, their papers. Who knows if they were real or not? I wouldn't let anyone mess up the first class section just because they had a promotional ticket." A moment of silence in the courtroom. Then the judge's pen was tapped. No one needs to say anything more.
The media aired the recording just 40 minutes later. A wave of reaction erupted. Civil rights groups in Texas hold marches. Veterans speak out in defense of Olivia, one of those who served in the military. Single mothers, older women, people of color took turns posting videos to share. "I have been rejected like that. I have been called unworthy, but I have no position to protest." And for the first time in years, the word first class is no longer a privilege. It becomes a moral test. What about Brenda? She bowed her head, but did not admit her mistake. She said she was just following her intuition and had never been trained to handle senior passengers who were minorities. An excuse that sounds like a system-wide indictment. Judge Catherine Hollis, who has tried many federal civil rights cases, looked at Brenda and concluded, "The court does not judge feelings, the court judges acts." And she acted as if it was her privilege to judge others. But here we have the Constitution, and no one is above it. The verdict was, Brenda gets 3 years in prison for vandalizing federal property, passport, 2 years probation after expiration, and forced to attend the 6-month training course, Unconscious Bias and Civil Conduct. The court did not impose a large financial penalty, understanding that the public and historical shame was the harshest sentence for Brenda. In another development, CEO Jonathan Rees was asked to resign by the board of shareholders. A new announcement was made.
Ascend Air is committed to comprehensive reform. We have established an internal equity monitoring unit under the advice of Olivia Munro to ensure that all passengers are treated fairly, regardless of their skin color, background, or appearance. At a hearing of the Senate Transportation Committee, Senator Marcia Green asked Olivia Munro, "If you could say just one thing to every airport employee in America, what would you say?" Olivia looked straight into the TV camera. "You don't have to love everyone, just don't jump to conclusions about other people based on the clothes they wear, the voice they use, or the color of their skin. Because in each airline ticket, there is not only passenger information, but also the dignity they are given." On a winter morning in Washington, D.C., as the wind blew across the marble steps of the Capitol, a woman stepped up to the podium in a charcoal blue suit, no jewelry, no show. Her name was announced in the resolute voice of the chairman. "Please invite Ms. Olivia Munro, Senior Investigator, Federal Aviation Security Office." The whole room stood. Cameras were on her, but Olivia didn't bow. She walked slowly, steadily, her eyes straight ahead, the way she had walked through hundreds of airport gates. No need for special privileges, just integrity.
For the next 17 minutes, she presented an unprecedented report. The report included not only the conclusions of the Gate B32 incident, but also a summary of 12 years of secret investigation activities with data from 42 airports, 19 airlines, and nearly 3.5 million passengers observed.
She didn't use words of condemnation. She didn't use a critical tone. She simply presented the facts, every number, every chart, every video clip that showed people of color have 6 times more likely to be re-examined. Elderly Asian women are denied medical supplies 3 times more often than white women with the same conditions. Passengers wearing casual clothes were rated as showing signs of dishonesty 57% more often. The truth, cold and clear, like a flashlight shining through the clear coat of aviation paint, so-called professional intuition is sometimes a cover for personal bias. When the presentation ended, the audience fell silent. Then the applause broke out. Not loud, not overwhelming, but slow, steady, like the silent recognition of a nation that had just seen itself in a mirror. Since the incident, Ascend Air has gone through 3 periodic audits per year, lost more than $380 million market value, and is under pressure from 19 states to adjust its operating procedures. But the biggest change isn't in the numbers, but at how passengers see themselves. At airports across the United States, a campaign called Look Again was launched, with billboards showing diverse faces, along with the text, "Don't let the first look be the look of judgment." Brenda Kowalski, after serving her prison term, lived in seclusion in a small Midwestern town. No one mentioned her name in the newspapers anymore, but she was occasionally seen at the library, quietly checking out books on civil rights, social psychology, and one called "Justice is Not What We Say, It's What We Allow." Some people say she changed. Some people say no one can really change. But Olivia once said at a seminar at Howard University, "Not everyone has the opportunity to do it right the first time, but everyone has the opportunity to choose an option, stand outside the truth, or go with it, however late."
Many years later, people still talk about Gate B32, not as a scandal, but as a historical turning point. A modern version of Rosa Parks' bus seat, of the Selma water cannon, or the rallying cry, "I am somebody." Because in a busy world where people easily miss each other in security lines, it is look back and look right at a person may be the most humane act. On Olivia Munro's retirement, there was no party, no coverage, just a small bronze plaque outside the main conference room at the FAA reads, "The Munro Room, where silence is heard and truth prevails." Passengers still travel every day. Gate B32 is still open. New staff, new procedures, new eyes. But beneath every uniform, every name tag, every look, is a reminder that never goes away.
Justice need not be noisy. It just needs to be left alone. Olivia Munro's story is about more than just a torn passport. It illustrates an important truth. When we remain silent in the face of injustice, we allow prejudice to flourish in the places that seem safest, like the boarding gate, where fairness and professionalism are supposed to prevail. The biggest lesson from the Gate B32 incident is the truth doesn't need to be shouted. It just needs someone to stand up and not back down. Olivia didn't use power to intimidate. She used principle, integrity, and patience. And in doing so, a whole system changed. What about you? When you hear this, how do you feel? Have you or a loved one ever been judged because of their appearance, voice, or skin color? Please share your thoughts in the comment section. If you believe that justice begins with the smallest things, please like, share this story, and subscribe so you don't miss the next stories where the truth always has a voice. Thanks for listening.